Good evening, everyone, and thanks once again for joining us for this Saturday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist David Percy. Up first, we've got, peak wind gusts, most intense storm ever to occur in the Bering Sea during the month of September. Brought some pretty formidable wind gusts in across the west coast areas, actually even into the central interior as well in some locations. Of course, what stands out there, Cape Romanzoff, peak wind gusts 91 miles an hour, then on up to the north, Red Dog Dock, 67 miles an hour, then back down Yukon Delta coast, Hooper Bay, 67 miles an hour, or down on the southwest coast, and then back up to Teller, 64 miles an hour, and along the south coast of the Seward Peninsula, winds gusting 60 to 65 miles per hour. Nome, 56 miles an hour. Elam, about the same. And Marshall, inland there, about 55 miles an hour or so. And that's pretty indicative of the inland area. St. Mary's, 53 miles an hour. Wales, about 51 miles an hour. And around 50 miles an hour there for St. Michael and Shishmaref. And then kind of coming down under 50 miles an hour, Deering, Kotzebue. Those are out of the southeast there, up in those areas. And Point Hope, same thing, east, southeast, about 46. Kiana, 41 miles an hour, and that's about what Kenai had today. South winds gusting to 40 miles an hour earlier today and overnight last night. Anyway, from that, of course, resulted in widespread coastal flooding. And here's one example, Kotlik. There you can see the comparison. The clear day showing the water came way in, and big storm surge there covering areas. And that's pretty indicative. That was the case along much of the west coast, Kuskokwim Delta coast, right on up into the Seward Peninsula area, the Bering Strait, St. Lawrence Island areas there. And there's still a coastal flood watch out, been extended there for the southwest coast, Kuskokwim Delta, Nunivak Island, until 10 p.m. this evening. And coastal flooding expected to occur until then, but conditions will improve after that. Yukon Delta, there's a high wind warning out until 10 p.m. this evening, and then the coastal flood warning out until 10 a.m. Sunday. And that also is the same for the Seward Peninsula, or the Seward Peninsula, the south coast there, Bering Strait, south coast, and the St. Lawrence Island area. High wind warning out till 10 p.m. this evening. Coastal flood warning out till 10 a.m. Sunday. And then going on up to the north there, along the northwest coast, and the north coast of the Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref, on up to about Point Hope. High wind warning until 10 p.m. this evening, but the coastal flood warning remains out in those areas north of the Bering Strait until 6 p.m. Sunday. Otherwise, a couple of wind advisories there for the lower Yukon River Valley area, looking for winds gusts to 50 miles an hour until 10 p.m. this evening. And for the northern Kuskokwim Valley, McGrath, Nikolai, and those areas, winds gusting 45 miles an hour, again until 10 p.m. this evening. So from there, going to satellite imagery, you can see that low crossing the Bering Strait this morning, moving slowly into the southern Chukchi Sea, kind of slowing down a little bit. Southwest winds holding on longer along the Kuskokwim Delta coast. That's why the coastal flood warning got extended out to 10 p.m. this evening from what it was earlier today at 4 p.m. because of a slower moving system there. Going to kind of park itself west of Point Hope. And you can see the clouds spreading in. The original occluded front really just fell to pieces there as it approached the eastern interior areas, dragging across the Copper River Basin. And really just some clouds moving across the northern panhandle today. A lot of clearing taking place down over south central Alaska. Good sunshine throughout the day. Cook Inlet into the Manauskas, the Sitna Valley, Copper River Basin, western Copper River Basin. But the strong winds continuing all along the west coast areas, slowly coming down from south to north. Conditions will improve here over the next 12 to 18 hours. And Then another wave there over the eastern Aleutians, much weaker than the former system there, but that'll start spreading some moisture northeastward, all into Kodiak Island later on. But that system, again, slowing down as it slowly weakens. Eventually tonight, the stronger southwest winds will get in north of the Bering Strait and bring the coastal flood warning into the northwest coastal areas. As you can see today, 969 millibar low pressure there on that system just north of the Bering Strait this afternoon, and that tight gradient across the north coast, or across the Seward Peninsula, northern Bering Sea. Still the Yukon Delta starting to slacken up over the Kuskokwim Delta. Light winds though, Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula, and the sunshine, south central Alaska. And looks like the hardest hit area, St. Lawrence Island and south coast of the Seward Peninsula down to about Hooper Bay. They're seeing the peak winds and especially the sea storm surges this afternoon. And those sea levels stay high through tonight and then slowly subside late tonight and Sunday there. And storm surge at Nome exceeded the 2011 storm, which was pretty significant, especially for September. Otherwise, moving on to the forecast for tonight, system slowly weakens. Next system spreads some rain to the Alaska Peninsula. And Sunday, that system really weakens by afternoon, but still just west of Cape Lisburne. Not much of a coastal flood threat for the western Arctic coast area there, with that low kind of staying a little farther to the south and really weakening. And then you can see rain moves in back across south central Alaska, southwest interior, and that low off the western Arctic coast really not a factor with either precipitation or wind or sea heights anymore, just scattered showers across the eastern Bering Sea, sunshine for the Panhandle, and high pressure over the western Bering and Aleutians. Lows tonight in the 30s, Susitna Valley, Copper River Basin, otherwise in the 40s elsewhere. Highs tomorrow, upper 50s, Copper River Basin, mid to upper 50s, southern Alaska, Kodiak Island, lower 60s over the southern southeast coast. Lows 30s and 40s, followed by highs in the lower to mid 60s again for the southern Panhandle, otherwise highs 50 to 55, some areas a little warmer. Up north, about the same, 30s and 40s for the lows north of the Brooks Range, otherwise in the 40s, highs in the 50s, 40s along the Arctic coast, followed by lows in the 30s to lower 40s, most everywhere now. Mid-30s in the Tanana Valley, followed by highs, 40s north of the Brooks Range, and 50s, trying to push 60 there in the Tanana Valley and the Yukon Flats. Out in the west, lows in the 40s tonight, highs in the 50s, lower to mid-50s, some areas stuck in the upper 40s, St. Lawrence Island in the mid-40s, really not too bad with a Monday morning low up there about 40, so staying above freezing in those areas that lost power. And highs Monday afternoon, mid-50s Bristol Bay, lower to mid-50s Alaska Peninsula, lower 50s in the Aleutians and Pribilofs, mid-40s for the high St. Lawrence Island.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Okay, on to flying weather. The North Slope, Arctic coast looking pretty good Sunday morning. IFR banked up along the southern slopes of the Brooks Range, and then marginal VFR central western interior into the northern Bering Sea. IFR central Aleutians eastward to the western Alaska Peninsula with a band extending in across Togiak Bay into the southern Kuskokwim Valley. Pretty good VFR with areas of marginal VFR southeast interior, mostly VFR for Cook Inlet, Kenai Peninsula, Prince William Sound, the North Gulf Coast, some IFR over the northern Panhandle, and some VFR over the southern part of the southeast coast with a marginal VFR mainly along the coastline. And for the afternoon, no change up north really, a little bit more marginal VFR from, say, Point Lay westward. Otherwise, pretty stationary there with the IFR in the southern slopes of the Brooks Range tending to dissipate a little bit. Western interior, lots of marginal VFR with some scattered areas of VFR as well. And VFR from Amchitka Island westward. And then you get into the IFR again for AKwx, Eastern Aleutians, Alaska Peninsula, and on up to Kodiak Island IFR. Marginal VFR now slipping on up into almost into central Cook Inlet. It looks like staying south of Kenai area and Soldotna, with pretty good VFR. Matanuska, Susitna Valley, northern Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound, right on up across Copper River Basin into the much of the eastern interior, and also for the eastern North Gulf Coast Panhandle, all VFR. VFR from Yakutat southeastward to Dixon Entrance on Monday morning. VFR north of the Alaska Range, central eastern interior. Same pattern there along the Brooks Range. IFR south side, VFR to the north. And IFR Nunivak Island down to the north shore of Unalaska Island, Alaska Peninsula, and on up into Bristol Bay and the southern Kuskokwim Valley. Some IFR now, lower conditions into south central Alaska. The IFR eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range or along the mountains there. Also slipping on up into the southern Kenai Peninsula, Resurrection Bay to Whittier and Prince William Sound. Stays VFR over the Panhandle. And for the afternoon, VFR southeast coast, but marginal VFR showing up along the north coast in the afternoon, with IFR Yakutat westward, again into possibly Whittier, maybe Portage, definitely more likely for Resurrection Bay, and marginal VFR with IFR toward the western Alaska Range, south central Alaska, Copper River Basin mostly marginal, but stays VFR north of the mountains, western southwest interior, much of the Bering Sea, marginal VFR. Passes Anatuvik, IFR, becoming marginal in the afternoon. Same kind of a improving trend for Adigan as well. IFR trending toward marginal. And for Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR early, areas of becoming VFR at times into the afternoon and evening. I think rainy, same pattern, maybe some marginal VFR early on. Otherwise, pretty good VFR. Windy, VFR, north and south entrances. Isabel, looking good. VFR there. Same for Mentasta, good VFR flying day Sunday for that pass, as well as Tanita. And Portage, VFR, with Chilkoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, 4,000 feet in over the interior. And then gradient there with a jet, 6 to 12,000 feet, Bristol Bay down into the southern Gulf of Alaska, right into the Panhandle. And icing. Area sliding northeastward there. That's what's bringing the lower conditions, marginal VFR into southern Cook Inlet and Kodiak Island area. Above about 7,000 feet, isolated moderate there, otherwise light to light rime icing. And then areas of isolated moderate icing up over the northern Bering Sea and the northwest interior, mostly along and south of the Brooks Range. Jet stream, upper level low kind of slowing up there as it gets into the Chukchi Sea at all levels, and kind of another trough back to the south. So southwest winds up to 120 knots right into the southwest coast. This at 33,000 feet, turn westerly 105 knots, and northwest there in Canada. 9,000 feet, 40 knots from the southwest along the northwest coast, Point Hope to Kivalina. 45 knots Bristol Bay, northwest 40 off the southeast coast, and 35 knots, better, lighter winds now, especially up there, Seward Peninsula, northwest coast, 35 to 40 knots. Turbulence, considerable moderate chop, especially for small aircraft. Below 8,000 feet there, Brooks Range, northern interior, down into the Kuskokwim, or northern Kuskokwim Valley, but pretty good southern Alaska in the Aleutians.
When you think of a national park, you probably envision wide open natural spaces undisturbed by human activity. There are indeed such places, but even in some of the most remote areas of a place like Kenai Fjords National Park in Alaska, the mark of man is present. Marine debris is a menace to the farthest reaches of our globe, and even designated national park lands are not immune. In the summer of 2009, the Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance, a grassroots conservation organization based in Seward, Alaska, decided to do something about the marine debris fouling the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park. Marine debris coordinator Tim Johnson had first-hand experience with the issue.
The summer before, my wife and I, Michelle, had done a paddle from Seward, sea kayak paddle from Seward to Homer. Really, our eyes were open to some areas that we didn't realize there was so much accumulation. It was very deceiving up front. You couldn't really get a feel for the extent and impact of it. You've got this nice high tide line that's quite pristine, and you really don't get a picture for the impact, the amount of debris in that area until you get behind those storm berms. You get back into the lagoons and the vegetation around those lagoons. And then you see the absolute extent back into that veg and how intertwined and enmeshed these decades of trash deposition. So we were just appalled by that and said we got to get something together on a larger scale.
The Resurrection Bay Conservation Alliance is a local nonprofit community organization, and they have been instrumental in helping the Park Service obtain funding to get larger boats to help move the debris, and they get volunteer labor and organize the work trips. And so it's really a partnership between the Park Service and the community to help get out and really get a project done that in and of itself any one group couldn't do on their own.
Most of that trash was baggable. However, there were large items, huge, piles of hauser line, for example, that we just had to hoist up onto the boat.
The volunteers didn't just bag, haul, and hoist the garbage, but also carefully recorded what types of debris were collected.
In many ways, the debris itself is a resource. Archaeologists use middens, the trash heaps, as a way of analyzing past cultures. And in one sense, marine debris is a form of a midden. It's a trash heap that left for the future would be something that people could use to analyze our culture. It may not say the best things about our culture or everything that we want, but we need to be able to document what we've done so that we can preserve that legacy, make sure that we as a society don't forget what we've been doing.
We had two larger categories of marine debris that we picked up. Commercial fishing means like, say, gill nets, large hauser lines, anything that would be associated with more of a commercial fishing scale. And then the second category was more recreational fishing and household, which would be general plastics, things like that. So we had about a 75% of the commercial fishing marine debris element, and about 25% of the recreational and household further out the bay. And we had the exact opposite the closer we got to Seward. Within the bay, it was about 25% commercial fishing versus 75% recreational fishing and household.
The trash is not just unsightly for park visitors, but also poses threats to wildlife and marine habitat.
Really one of the larger issues now that you go to this plastic that can really get into the food web and affect the food web differently than something like glass.
These substances, for instance, all these polystyrene blocks that are breaking down into all these little crumbly bits are further breaking down on a microscopic level, and how much of an impact that has, in this ecosystem is yet to be determined, but I think it's got pretty high potential.
Well known that sea turtles will eat plastic bags floating in the water. They look like jellyfish to a sea turtle, and obviously a plastic bag doesn't go well in the digestive system of a turtle. Albatross will see small pieces of plastic floating on the surface and think they're small fish and other food sources and eat that in their stomachs, especially in some of the northwestern Hawaiian Islands, they'll find dead albatross that have starved to death with a full stomach, and it's full of pieces of plastic.
We're affecting our local areas this way, but we need to be thinking about it from more of a state and a global, international scale. And most importantly, to try and focus on prevention of it coming in the first place. Because we're just going to see this continuing, to build up on our beaches unless we're able to get a little bit more of an approach on prevention on the front end.
Marine debris is really a global problem, in all the oceans, and there are many different sources. Global shipping is one. Fishing debris from commercial fishing, recreational boating activity on land, stuff blowing off land, washing down streams, people just throwing stuff on the shore.
Though the problem can seem overwhelming, Johnson remains upbeat about making a positive difference.
No, you gotta start locally. You gotta take control of what you can do, and make something with that, and try and move on from there.
Overall, more than 9 tons of debris was removed from the beaches of Kenai Fjords National Park and transported back to Seward to be deposited in a landfill.
People gave a lot to the project in order to make it happen. That was awesome. One of the most amazing experiences I've ever had. Being able to put that large of a group of volunteers together, dedicated volunteers to put that much effort and give that much time and pull all the different agencies together to see it all happen was incredible. It was incredible. Yeah, very fulfilling experience.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. For the south coast of the Panhandle tomorrow, northwest winds 20 knots, these are around 9 feet. And the central coast, northwest 15 to 20 knots or so. Then up on the north coast, light variable winds at 5 knots, but seas still up around 8 feet. Northern inside channels, light winds. And for Stevens Passage, south winds at 10 knots, Clarence Strait looking at a northwest breeze, 15 knots, seas around 3 feet. And then for the day on Monday, central northern inner channels, variable winds at 5 knots. And for Clarence Strait, northwest breeze at 10 knots. And the south coast, northwesterlies 15 to 20 knots, seas 9 to 10 feet. And the north coast, south winds 10 to 15 knots with 7-foot seas. Prince William Sound, variable winds at 10 knots for Sunday. And for the North Gulf Coast, variable to west winds 10 to 15 knots, seas around 5 feet. Barren Island, southwest wind 15 knots, variable at 15 for Kamishak Bay. Lighter winds for Cook Inlet tomorrow, southwest at 15, seas 3 feet. And even lighter winds in store for Monday for Cook Inlet from the east and southeast at about 10 knots with 2 to 3 foot seas, although it will be a little wetter. And for Kamishak Bay, southwest winds 20 knots. Small craft advisories for the Barren Islands and portions of the North Gulf Coast, south winds 25 knots with seas 7 to 9 feet. Prince William Sound east winds at 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Kodiak Island for Sunday, south to southwest winds 15 to 20 knots. And small craft advisories for the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula, south winds 25 knots, seas 10 feet. Variable at 10 for the Bering Sea side of the peninsula, Bristol Bay, southeast winds at 10 knots. And for Monday, Kodiak Island, southwest winds 15 to 25 knots, west winds 15 to 20 knots for the Alaska Peninsula. And for Bristol Bay, west winds 15 knots, seas 5 feet. Eastern Aleutians, west-southwest winds 10 to 15 knots, 7 to 8 foot seas. Central Aleutians, west at 10. And the western Aleutians, northwest 15 to 20 knots, strongest west to Kiska with seas 6 to 8 feet. And for Monday, from Shimia to Kiska, small craft advisory, south winds 25 knots, otherwise central Aleutians, west winds at 20 knots with 6-foot seas. Eastern Aleutians, mostly 15-knot westerly winds with seas 5 to 6 feet. And for the coast south of Nunivak Island, south winds 20 knots for the day Sunday. Pribilos, variable at 10. And the Yukon Delta coast, small craft advisories, winds southwest 25 knots, and then 30 knot southwest winds, St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound, seas 9 to 12 feet, and 20 knot winds from the southwest for St. Matthew Island. And for Monday, for the Pribilofs, west winds 15 knots, seas 5 feet, southwest coast, winds 15 knots, seas down to 5 feet, and northwest winds 15 knots for St. Matthew Island, and winds down for St. Lawrence Island and Norton Sound, still southwest, but only 15 knots, and the sea subsiding down to 2 to 4 feet. For the eastern Beaufort Sea coast, Sunday, south winds 15 to 20 knots, seas up around 8 to 9 feet, east winds 25 knots for the central coast with 10-foot seas, and then for the western coast down to Cape Thompson, east winds 20 knots, Cape Thompson to Wales, southwest winds 30 knots, seas around 11 feet. Lighter winds from Wales to Cape Thompson on Monday, 15 knots from the west, and then northwest 20 knots, Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort, western and central Arctic coast, south winds 20 knots, seas 4 to 8 feet, and 15 to 20 knot south winds for the eastern Beaufort Sea coastline. For tonight, that low slowing down there, stopping almost west of Point Hope, and that's going to be slowly weakening. Look for the southwest winds to increase north of the Bering Strait, and winds will slowly be coming down tonight, but seas storm surges will stay high through the night tonight, with the highest already occurring this afternoon, slowly coming down. Light winds down to the south, stays dry over southern Alaska. Isolated showers in the Panhandle. For tomorrow, that low continues to weaken as it slowly pulls north there, just having trouble getting north of Cape Lisburne latitude there. Next system, weak, spreads rain into Kodiak, southern Cook Inlet in the afternoon. Then that pushes periods of rain across much of southern Alaska, save the Copper River Basin and eastern interior, with dry conditions in the northeast. And that low, just a shadow of its former self there right off the western Arctic coast. Winds no longer a factor. Sea heights no longer a factor. Just some scattered showers over the eastern Bering Sea. Mostly sunny for the Panhandle.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.